My name is Clay, and this is the Enneagram Prison Project podcast. EPP's Guide Training Program, usually referred to as GTP, is an International Enneagram Association accredited training program. Say that 5 times. It's for folks who have completed our first 2 classes and are aspiring to move forward on their path to becoming an EPP Guide. In this episode, I speak with a few of our pod guides from GTP 8, which we've recently completed, to talk a little bit about what exactly goes on in these guide training programs. Thanks for being here, thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoy this episode of the Enneagram Prison Project podcast. Obviously, I know who you are, but for the listener who might not, who are you? Who are you, and why are you here? The big version. No, I'm kidding. Or as I say more casually, introduce your damn self.
So I am Jason White. I am. How many different angles could I address that from? I got involved with EPP, I think, back in 2016 when Rene Lopez, an ambassador, I met him outside of EPP, and he invited me to a meeting, a reconnecting meeting, and I was immediately impressed by the guides, by the material, and I was very skeptical. So so I just kept coming back, and here I am. It's difficult to say no at EPPs because it is such a great mission and the people are so great. So I have just continued to get more and more involved. And at first that was helping getting the LMS started and getting everything moved online when the pandemic started is really when I started getting more involved. And so I do technical support and technical stuff there. And then it was becoming a guide. And so I recently became a guide. I went through GTP 7 and I've been doing courses on the inside. You'll also see me in the Connect on Monday nights at 5 p.m. PT. Please come and check that space out if you've finished any of our programs. And it just gives you a little taste of the EPP magic every week, something that you can put on your calendar and just show up when you're available. And I do a number of other things. Like
you're an organizational juggernaut, I think is probably the fair way to describe you.
I'll take that.
Yeah.
I love it.
I was ready. If you were going to disagree, I was ready to argue about it because it's just, you make a massive difference. And in all sorts of areas of the project, and we love you. It's good having you around. Did you? And for the curious, by the way, when we started doing our Words of Appreciation segment on the podcast, Jason was the inspiration for that because I found myself personally talking about Jason in a lot of different areas. Like, oh yeah, Jason's awesome. Oh yeah, sure, just ask Jason. Oh, this, that, and the other. And one day I thought, like, holy shit, I wonder if he has any idea of like how highly people think of him. And so I thought, why don't we just do this like publicly and get all the different words that I've heard recently to describe him and, throw that into one big casserole, a linguistic casserole. I've never said those 2 words together, by the way. Just fuck it. Why not? So in addition to all the other things that you do, you're also the inspiration behind what I find to be a very fun segment to do with the podcast and appreciating folks, talking about them behind their back when they're not here to hear it. And it's nice. It's great having you around. I'm curious. A question, real quick. Did you know about the Enneagram before you met Rene and started coming to the reconnecting? It was still on the outside at that point, right?
Yeah, that was pre-COVID. So we were meeting in person. And no, I had no idea. In fact, the biggest word on the flyer was pizza. So Enneagram may have been mentioned, but I saw pizza, and it was a chance to hang out with Renee for a little bit. So that's why I really went.
For the record, neither of the P's in EPP stand for pizza, but it's not everybody knows that, but it's actually not the Enneagram Pizza Project. Although that wouldn't be a bad idea to have as an offshoot. Feel free to unmute and let people hear, because you're laughing and nobody thinks that I'm funny right now. This is a no mute zone, sir. I'm kidding. Mute as you wish. So typically we do these in person, and we're on Zoom today, which is so nice and so convenient. And I'm glad that you elected to sit down with me for a little bit and chat about GTP in particular. Oh, one more question. So you didn't know about the Enneagram, and then we'll get to GPA. You didn't know about the Enneagram. What was your process of finding your type and I don't know that I don't spill anybody else's beans. So whatever information you bring to the table is what we talk about. And I don't add anything beyond that, just as a way of respecting boundaries. But how did you go about finding your type once you started kind of sitting and hearing about what all this Enneagram stuff is?
I think I opened up the wisdom of the Enneagram, and I went through the type test in there. And I think my mission was to find out what was wrong with it, and that it was totally generic. Like, it was totally generic, and every type could apply to everybody. And then I read through them, and I'm like, oh, a couple of these sound more like me than the others. And then I think I eventually landed on type 1, but type 1 said that they were angry, and I wasn't angry. I never got angry. And so I still went with that. And they must have just been wrong about the angry part. Everybody else in my life could have told you that I got angry on a regular basis, except for me. And so it took me maybe a year before that that really sank in. And of course, that's transformational when you see yourself in a new way. And the Enneagram has just kept showing me myself in new ways.
I need, we need one day. So we only have 30 minutes today to chat. And one day I want to sit down and talk with you about anger. This came up with my mom recently, talking about anger, and specifically the question of how does anger serve you? And a lot of people experience that same reaction of, I'm not angry at all. And if I was, how would that serve me? It's not that big. I'm not angry. Like, that idea, I've heard that before from other folks, from other types even. So we're going to skip a lot of history and getting right up to GTP8. And I love that you were in GTP7 as a participant, and now you were in GTP8 as a pod guide. And by the way, GTP stands for Guide Training Program. It's not the final step that guides go through, or prospective guides go through, but it's one of the final steps. And actually, how about you? You feel like explaining to the layman what exactly is, to the layperson, what exactly is GTP? What is Guide Training Program?
That's a great question. So the Guide Training Program is really where you make a number of transitions. So you make a really, I think, fundamentally a transition from going through the course and being a participant and receiving to giving. You make a transition into a mindset of service. You start to take the content and you internalize it a little bit more, but your whole focus shifts to, how can I give this to people? How can I bring this to people in an impactful way? And it's not just the content, it's the connection. Like, the content is actually third on the list for things that we want to bring to people. Connection is right up at the top. And so learning how do you form that connection? How do you bring people together in a group and have the learning there and have the content there? All the elements contribute, for sure. And so it's a practice. It's a practice of shifting that perspective, shifting to being able to present. There's a lot of feedback from guides, from ambassadors. Clay did not say, but he was very involved. He was he was there all over the place, and we're so blessed to have the ambassadors because they're bringing the perspective from the classroom that we can't get any other way. And so we bring all those elements together, and that's happening with one hand, and with the other hand, we're asking everybody to do the inner work at the same time. So you come into GTP, and it is. I mean, I'd show you the syllabus, but we're on a podcast. Yeah. It's a pretty. it's a very packed schedule. If you just look at the amount of work that we ask you to do, then it's already feeling like it's a packed schedule. But as with life, we're also saying, hey, your type is going to show up. Your red flag is going to show up. Your core desire and basic fear are going to show up. And as there's kind of this learning, all of this new material, we go through and see how type shows up for each person. And it does show up as you start presenting the material. Your center of intelligence, your particular lens on the world, and the strengths of your type show up. And that's an important part of learning to become a guide, because we cannot bring our biases into the room with us. It's not fair.
What happens if you do? Or what happens if a person does? If a guide brings their biases into the room, it's. I agree. By the way, that's. I agree that we can't do that, or we shouldn't do that. And then the next natural thought for me is, well, what happens if we do?
So we're forming a container of safety. We're forming an environment in more than one way where people feel comfortable showing up. And that's hard. That's hard in a jail or a prison. If you've never been there, it's a lot of concrete and steel, and a very bad day for most people. The worst day of most people's lives, really, I would say, in a lot of cases. And so how do you go into that environment and create a place where people feel comfortable showing up, comfortable sharing with other people that are residents there, comfortable sharing in front of somebody with a clipboard who just came in, who they don't really know? Like how do you create that container of safety? And people are really wise. They're really they're able to pick up on every cue, every subtle hint. And so if I'm bringing something in, like, I guess it is fine for me to bring in that I'm having a bad day, as long as during the check-in I say, hey, today's hard.
Yeah.
In fact, it's better if I am able to do that. And when I do that, because that shows that I'm in this with everybody. And that's another part of being a guide in the whole process. Like we're called guides because we're there walking alongside everyone. We're not separate. And that helps create this container.
Yeah, a guide is as opposed to like a teacher where they stand above and rain down information upon those below them. Right? That's my words, by the way. I'm not putting that on anybody else to agree or co-sign that. But the difference, it's not just semantics. There's a reason we say guide instead of teacher, and it's my favorite way to illustrate this is it's not standing in front of or behind, pushing or pulling. It's standing next to and walking with. Is that fair?
Absolutely.
So you said earlier, connection is at the top, content is at the bottom in a list of 3 things that are very important. What's that middle thing?
Clay, you're asking me to give away all the secret sauce.
Okay, hey, we can bleep that too. We can bleep as many things we need to bleep.
think connection and content are two of the big ones for sure.
Yeah.
Where there are several different lists depending on how you shuffle them, but that and all the elements are important.
Yeah.
But connection is really like nothing happens if I don't feel safe,
Right.
and nothing happens if I don't feel like I can share with you or like we can be here together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The way that I've thrown it out there to folks in everywhere, frankly, but specifically in GTP, is who you are is more important than what you know, and that is coming from someone who I spend most of my time in Type 5, and that's blasphemy for the Type 5 to say that what you know is lesser than who you are, but it is. It's who you are, and that I'm speaking to the connection that you can have with other folks is who you are, who you show up as. Are you here right now? If that doesn't exist, then what you know doesn't matter. I'm not listening to anything that you say. So, yeah. So how was it going through, I'll ask it this way. What were some of the notable differences going through the guide training program as a pod guide versus a participant? Like, were there things that you remembered as a participant being easier or more difficult, and then being on this side of it looked differently? I don't know. Does the perspective change a lot when you're going through it, looking at the homework instead of doing the homework, or giving feedback instead of receiving feedback, stuff like that? Were there any big differences that stuck out to you?
I would say it's completely different. It's completely different. I think the experience as a participant is it's a little bit content heavy in the beginning, but there's a lot of really learning how to think and how to think about the Enneagram in the way that EPP does, in a compassionate way, and go through for each type and tell the story of each type in a really compassionate, but yet real look. And so that's one of the assignments. So it's kind of and it's also going through our most difficult modules, and we ask you to teach the modules in a very short period of time on purpose, so that you are encouraged to pick out what's most important about, or what the most important sections of each module are. And I didn't design any of that or the process. That was that was people way before me, and they are very wise. So there's a whole bunch of really interesting things about the process and being a participant. Being a pod guide it's about having welcoming and inviting a small group of 4 to 6 into this process, into what it is to be a guide, into EPP in a way. Like all of our public programs are, and all of our programs are an invitation to our community. And so GTP is an invitation into our guide community, and all the support there, and the way that we do things as guides. There's a lot of so there's a lot of answering questions. There's a lot of inspiring. We're relating stories about what it's like on the inside, relating stories about EPP. But it's. I mentioned that you're doing the work, the inner work, as you're going through GTP. So there are tears, there's laughter. People face the core challenges of their type, not as an abstract idea, but as I am terrified. Like I am in tears, I'm shaking, I'm terrified, and I'm going to sit with that with my feet in the fire. And as a pod guide, you sit with people. And I bring in the Enneagram, I bring in type observations, but all the work has to be done by each person, by each guide as they go through.
Last but not least, and again, we have wiggle room, so feel free to wiggle all you like. Just a wide open question of anything you'd like to add, any questions you want to answer that I didn't ask about GTP, about EPP, about being a guide, about literally anything. The floor is yours. I want to give you the last words here.
Yeah, thank you. I think I mentioned just briefly that the GTP is really the beginning of the guide process. When you finish GTP, you are not a guide. You've practiced and you have some of the material that we use on the inside that you're familiar with. But what makes a guide is someone who can go into a jail or a prison and sit with the men and women there through really difficult conversations, and to create an environment where those conversations can happen, an environment where we all feel safe and welcome to show up just as we are. And I think that it is that process of sitting with people and showing them their inviting everyone to see their essential goodness, and inviting over and over everyone to engage with the best and the challenging parts of who they are. That's what makes a guide. And that's at least another 6 months to a year process of going through and being with an experienced guide and doing the work. And so I'm really impressed by everyone who went through GTP, even people who went through GTP and decided, this is not for me. Because that takes a lot of guts. That takes a lot of self-awareness to go through, or to start and to say, even if you have to say, not now, I know that I can't give myself to this right now the way that this process calls for. So I want to appreciate everyone who made those difficult decisions, everyone who completed GTP, and I'm just really looking forward to seeing how, I think there were 45 or so, maybe a few less than that, let's say 40, that came through this most recent round. And I'm just looking forward to seeing the community grow. And we're really moving back to an in custody first emphasis. And so I expect that everyone will be going into a facility one way or another shortly over the next 6 months. And that's going to be a lot of energy and a lot of work and a lot of growth.
Okay, so I am Oshawa Bolton. I live in Bowling Green, Kentucky, type 4. Been studying the Enneagram since 92, so that's been a minute. I came to know EPP in 2015. It's when I met Susan Olesic. She came to speak at the Narrative Enneagram, where I was taking a workshop, and she was two sentences in to her presentation, and I was drawn in.
Do you remember what those 2 sentences were?
Well, one of them involved the phrase "prisons of our own making."
Yeah.
And what was really weird is that I was like I literally had that thought like a split second before she said it. Because she and it was probably more than a couple of sentences in actually, but right before she said that famous phrase, I said it, and then when she said, I was like, oh my God, she's reading my mind, or am I reading her mind, or but I knew we were on the same page.
So in 2015, had you had any kind of experience with the prison world, or any particular interest? I mean, I know you're at a thing for the Enneagram, so clearly you already were a bit into your Enneagram studies. But had you ever thought about what this tool could be used for behind the bars, as we sometimes say, or in the incarcerated world?
Yeah, Clay, I have to say no, that I had not. It never had crossed my mind to be working with incarcerated people. I never had anything, an aversion to it. In fact, what I liken it to is that I had spent over 30 years working with nursing home patients. Now, I came at it from the financial side, and my job was to try to help get the means from the government that they needed to have a quality life. So I was trying to give voice to a disenfranchised population. They just happened to be in the nursing home. And as soon as I heard about EPP, I realized that it was sort of the same thing, that it was another type of disenfranchisement, another type of people having somewhat lost a voice. And could I do anything to help with that? It was a very natural transition for me from nursing home to jail.
Yeah, that's not. I don't think I knew that. I know we've been friends for a while. I know a lot about you. I don't think I knew that. So what is it about the incarcerated? I mean, why? I'm going to ask you a very broad question that I like to hit people with sometimes. But why do we care about those who are locked up if they can't even follow the rules? And have lost their freedom? Why do we give a shit?
Oh, wow. It is a broad question. And the first thing I just notice is that my heart is alive when you're asking the question, because I do care for that population a lot. And I think that maybe they talked about, breaking the rules. I'm not so sure that they did break all the rules that we put on them, or that they knew they were breaking them, or that they knew how to do something different, or knew there was a rule. There's just so many questions that come up for me, like as to around that they broke the rules and now they're being punished. I don't see that at all. And the more I've gotten into knowing incarcerate people through these EPP classes, the more I see that the people, I don't even know how to extract them from the rest of the world. We're just people. And yet they're a group of people that I think need some help. One of my favorite things is to go in and ask, what if there's nothing wrong with you? I just love the reaction and the drop jaw sometimes that elicits, because that's what I really want to do, is to come in and say, I think it's time for us to talk about what's right about you, because we've spent our whole lifetimes, all of us, me included, hearing what's bad. So let's talk about what's good. It just gives me joy to bring that possibility to people. I
love that. I'm aware that it's an abrasive question, the way that I asked that, and I wouldn't put that on everybody. I like hearing you talk through that and share your thoughts on that. You said a minute ago, you're talking about going on the inside. Am I understanding correctly that you have been on the inside?
Yes, I made some trips actually in person. I think we were in jails in 2015 and 16, but they were very sporadic and occasional. If I happened to be out in California, I got to go with Susan into a place she was going. And there was a time or two that I actually presented some material. It was very much on the spot, and it wasn't really very good now that I look back at it. So that was the only time that I'd ever been on the inside. And then, of course, because I live, as I said, in Kentucky, we don't have a program here. The programs that I was aware of were out in California, and just wasn't feasible for me to be able to do that. And then, of course, COVID happened, and everything went on the inside.
Yeah.
I was able to begin guiding virtually, and I've done that a few times.
When did you become a guide for or with EPP?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because I haven't stopped guiding since I became a guide, and I lose track of when that was. I think that it was in 2020.
Okay.
So I was in the last GTP class, GTP 7.
Okay.
Which I do believe was in 2020.
Don't give me lying. I don't have.
I'd have to check my calendar.
And it's, if somebody wants to fact check, then that's on them. I also think it was them, but I wasn't as involved with GTP 7 as I was with GTP 8. So I don't remember the exact date, but also don't have a lot of context for some of the differences. What we did with 7 that we changed with 8, or if that even happened, or was it just a cookie cutter thing? You were a big part of GTP 8 as a pod guide, right?
I did serve as a pod guide for GTP 8.
And so what are from your experience, what were some of the things that you saw? I don't know, I guess just comparing the two, GTP 7 and GTP 8, what it's like to go through as a participant versus a pod guide, 2 years ago versus 2022. Any notable differences that come to mind when you think about those two classes?
Yeah, so I think when you go through, this is my experience going through GTP, and I was in 7. Everything's new. You don't have a clue what's going to happen when you start practice teaching. You're watching the clock. You're trying to get all the points in. I keep saying you, but it was me.
Yeah. But you just did a thing. I'm interrupting because you just did a thing that we talk about. And what was that where you flipped it from you to I? That's part of what we teach.
Right. I became emotionally responsible for what I'm saying.
Yeah. I hope I didn't derail you that too much there. I love watching that in action.
You didn't at all, and it actually kind of, as a side point, all the experience I had teaching for 35 years served me very little when I got into EPP guiding, because you was the term that I said, so learning to say I statements, that's really important. So I didn't know what to expect when I went into each session. I didn't know what to expect when I went into the practicum. I had a syllabus. I had the learning management system, LMS. And I particularly remember teaching the defense system and feeling like I had to just talk as fast as I could and then do a deep inhale. And then let it go again, just talk as fast as I could, because how was I going to get all this said in the amount of time that they were giving me, and they were watching me, so it was really kind of I don't want to say it was nerve wracking. It was just challenging. So I take that, and then I go into the apprenticeship, which for me was in custody, virtual in custody. And then I've guided some since then in custody virtually. And I realized very quickly that all the practice teaching that I did still didn't prepare me for the unknown of going into a classroom. I remember being like in front of my Zoom window, waiting for the cameras to run, as I call it, for the class to show up, and knowing breath by breath that I did not know what was going to get ready to happen. And then when the class showed up and I had a mentor guide, within about a minute, I was like, oh, yeah, I'm home. This feels so good. And then learning to manage that class might arrive late. I might lose 10 minutes right off the bat. It may take longer to center the class. We do a centering and a check-in. And it may actually, what I meant to say, it may take longer to do the check-in. And I allow for that when I can, because this is their chance to talk. And I want them to have that chance to talk and to be heard and do some serve and return with them. And sometimes I can, and sometimes I can't do as much as I want. And then to know that they might get called out for duties that they just found out that they had. So all these variables affect my session plan, to the point that the session plan is nothing more than version A. We're going to see how this goes. And then I have to learn how to skip certain things or put things in the following week, or let the students, when they're speaking to me, they're actually teaching the material a lot of times and just turning around pointing it out. So all this sort of what I call real life guiding versus practice teaching. I had that experience to go into GTP8 as a pod guide with. And so as I watched people in GTP8 practice teach, not one time, I mean, every time literally that I saw someone practice teach, I was right there with them, remembering how it is. I think I've got to get all this in, and it's got to be done a certain way, and I'm going to get a pass fail. And in that training, your mind cannot always be on your student. It's on getting to be with your student later. That's a real different mindset. And then also to sort of look at the people that are going through and watching them and thinking, this presentation needs some work, but they're going to be really good. They get on the inside because they are so present and so engaging.
As a pod guide, you have a big role in their development, because I was around a lot for the practicums, for the redos, for all that stuff, shared my feedback, and I was gone. And you had a pod, you had a smaller group of people that you had several conversations with, sometimes in a group setting, sometimes one-on-one, via, technology is really making it to where we can do things that we couldn't do in the past. But being able to give direct feedback, and also it's not always a pleasant thing to say sometimes, where it's like, I'll paraphrase, but like, hey, you really suck at this thing that you just did. Like how talk through some of the experience of that, where you see somebody and that they're good, that they have what it takes, and they're just hung up on a thing or whatever. And you don't have to mention names or anything like that, but I'm curious from your perspective, what that's like. How do you have those conversations where people really do miss the mark, and they did it in a safe place, but it's a thing that needs to be addressed before they go inside? What is that like from your perspective?
Well, I think my nature is to want to build people up. And so I have to keep sight of the goal here, which is the incarcerated students. What's going to be good for them? And then get past what my nature says. I don't need to make everybody feel good. I need to make sure that for my part in this, that I am witnessing and can recommend people as ready, I would say would be the word, to go and be with the incarcerated student. And that is a long process over the whole 8 or weeks plus. It's actually gone into about 9 to 10 weeks. And so just to give you some perspective, we spent about 48 hours in session in that 8 weeks. So that's just the sessions where the whole cohort is there. I spent another close to 50 hours with my 6 people beyond that. We met once a week for an hour and a half in a pod meeting. I had lots of interaction with them one-to-one. I met with them twice for an hour on a one-to-one. So there's a whole lot of this that builds, and you get to know the sense of someone, at least around our common goal. At the very end of my my very last pod meeting, I said, hey, why don't we bring something in that says a little about who we are outside of EPP? Like maybe bring, something that you're interested in. And it was like, oh, we have life outside of EPP. Well, yeah, we actually do.
That's funny.
So I believe in kindness, and I believe that kind feedback includes the hard message as well as the good stuff. So when I give the hard feedback, I sort of look at why am I doing this, and what do I think this will benefit for the person on the inside. I'm constantly thinking about that. There's nobody I've met that, oh, that's not good. That's not going to work at all. There are people I've met. I did strike that. When you get a sense of people who really see the cause that EPP represents, you want to support them. And I say that with a charge of emotion. I really feel something jumping in my heart center when I say that. You want to support the people who really get it. The ones, and maybe they do and maybe they don't, but you think they do at this point. You just want to support them. Yeah.
I agree, by the way. So my perspective, and I'm not a guide, and I don't know how often I say that, because in these conversations, I feel like I'm part of the team, and I totally am. But I'm not a guide. I don't have a pod. I don't have all the one-on-one conversations are not on my to-do list. I have my role, and I enjoy it. And those conversations for me, like, I have to very often reiterate, this is coming from a place of love and support. Like, I say it just as much for the person hearing it as I do as the person saying it for me. Like, because I got to remember, like, this is not American Idol. Like, I'm not trying to tell somebody how to succeed. They want to do something. I'm here to support that. That's what I see with the pod guides too. It's not so much, hey, I know the answer. I'm correcting a thing that you're doing wrong. It's more like, yeah, you're trying something, and I want to support you in doing it more to a greater degree, so that you can serve, the end of the line being, or what do they call this in business? The end. What's the person at the end of the you have
the end user.
End user. There we go. That's why I don't work for a big corporation. And in this case, the end user being, some person who is incarcerated, and we do have public programming. It's like, I'm not saying you have to be locked up to participate, but, prison is our middle name. So.
Right. And we are focusing and refocusing and constantly focusing on our incarcerated participants. That is the goal of EPP. Yeah. And so even the public programs need to support that. Why are we doing this? We're doing it for the benefit of people who are on the inside.
Yeah, I love that. And then it is a push, and they might already hear about this by the time the podcast is uploaded. There is a very intentional push recently to get back to that basic idea of, prison is our middle name. We might even mess around and get a t-shirt with that on it. Who knows?
That's right.
I've been asking for it for, I don't know, a decade, maybe.
Well, I support the notion that prison is our middle name and that we are here for the incarcerated. That's why I'm here. And, there is this whole aspect of finding community, and definitely EPP is a very welcoming community and a very safe place for me to be. And I love that part of it too. If it weren't for the incarcerated, I don't know that I'd be around. That's what I want to do. And that's what EPP wants to do. So we match. I think that one of the, I don't know, it may be really hard to overcome as a society is how we look at formerly incarcerated people. I'll just give you an example from one of my incarcerated students, or actually prefer to use the word participant because I'm in this with them and they're in it with me. He looked at me. I don't remember the context, but he said, I've met more good people in here than I knew out there. And I stopped and did a little quick 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on my hands of people I know closely. And I said, I agree with you. Mm-hmm. I would say the same thing, that I have met some really great people here. And great people are great people. Yeah. There's no distinction. And I know that it's kind of idealistic to want that in our society, but I really do want that. I really want people to be treated for who they are right now. Yeah. And you talk about breaking rules, and you're talking to a type 4. I love breaking rules. I think rules are made to be broken. Yeah. Well, I have that kind of streak about me too. And I'm no different than anyone. I just didn't get caught breaking all the rules that could have gotten me incarcerated.
I do have one more question. It's a very broad, open-ended question. Just ask you if you have any final thoughts, anything that we didn't address that you want to. When I look and I see somebody devoting themselves to something like this, and I know you care about it, so it's not like you're just serving my needs. We give a shit about the same things, and it's satisfying to look at my screen and see a friend who comes from a very different background, and we're standing shoulder to shoulder doing something that we love together. And so thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate you being here. And any closing thoughts, any questions that you want to answer that I didn't ask, anything, there's no time limit. The floor is yours. I'm done talking and I'll just leave it to you.
Well, Clay, thanks. And thank you for inviting me into this space. It is really great to be here with you. I want to say about GTP8 that I did not guide incarcerated classes during the time I did GTP8. But I had this thought, if I'm teaching 6 people to be guides, what an investment that is, what exponential growth that can provide. And you know who that growth is for? It's for the incarcerated people. So I do want to say that. And then in a more broad sense, the way that I feel about my work in EPP is that it's a calling. I don't like that word a whole lot. It sometimes triggers religious overtones or undertones that I'm not going after, but it is something that calls to me. And I get to do it. I'm invited to do it. I'm permitted to do it. I'm allowed to be in these places. It's utterly soul nourishing for me to be doing this work. It also keeps me on my toes with my own inner work. I can't go and represent anybody, but especially somebody like EPP, without being on my toes. I mean, that's just part of it. And then that's also an efficiency that I get where I'm doing this work for people, but I'm doing this work for my own benefit too, because I have to face me. It doesn't matter what I've done all day long. At the end of the day, I have to face me. And how did I do today? And doing this work with EPP calls me to be a better person.
Hey, it's Clay, and I want to pause here real quick to share with you a few words of appreciation for Jan Shegda. Now, Jan is an EPP guide, and she is also, a few bazillion other things inside of EPP. She helps make EPP what it is. She was very instrumental in the most recent offering of the guide training program, aka GTP8. And while I was talking to each of the guides that I chatted with for this episode, there was a point where I stopped and said, hey, what do you think about Jan Shegda? And so here are the answers to that question.
I'm sure that I can't say enough about Jan Shegda. She really, I don't know what this GTP would have been like without Jan. I don't know what the guide development process would be like without Jan. She's really holding guide development and all the different pieces of that. I think there's over a dozen different groups that meet are related to guide development. GTP is just part of that. GTP is really the beginning of the journey. And she created so many documents. She kept track of so many things and just made everyone feel so supported. Everyone feel included in the process, and offered structure and reassurance, like that as a guide or a pod guide. There's already a lot of moving pieces, and I couldn't imagine keeping track of everything. And so I'm so thankful that Jan was there and that she had the time and energy. That she put in so much time, and I'm sure I only saw a small part of it, but it seemed like she was always there, always online.
Definitely. And I will say that the work I've done before as a guide, I sort of interacted with my co-guide, and that was the end of it, really. And in GTP 8, there's an infrastructure that's much bigger than just two guides getting together. And Jan sort of represents to me the umbrella over the whole structure, the whole infrastructure. She was, sometimes I called her the principal of the school, because she kept things going and she made decisions. And I have to say that I didn't realize going in that position had been created or was in place. And so it took me a little bit to kind of catch on to who's Jan now, because I really didn't even know her that well. So what I will say in appreciation, and everything I would say about Jan today is an appreciation. She holds a hell of a lot. I mean, all that she does, and I had a conversation with her toward the end, and just got some information about how much she really holds. And I knew from what she was sending us to, help us do tracking of feedback and that sort of thing, that she was really on it. Dedicated, loyal, wanting to be good at it, like in a real 4 going to 1 way, just really wanting to bring that type 1 purity and goodness to the process. I think she word would be, I don't know, this is not one word, but she put up with a lot too. And as one has to do in that position. Yeah, I kind of wish I'd known. I wish if I had the opportunity GTP 9, I would jump at it. And if Jan were there, I would understand from day one how to benefit more from her support.
Jan Shegda. I don't know. I don't know how we would have done this without her, and I can't imagine a GTP ever happening without her. Now, we were so spoiled and so lucky to get her. Jan is just one of the most competent, selfless, I can do this kind of people I've ever met. She is there's just nothing that flaps her. There's nothing that she can't do. And she has this really beautiful ability to just see the simplest way to get to the next space. Like instead of taking a straight line approach like she does, I can like wiggle, go around all over the place and talk about it. And she's like, no, got it. And she's already there. And I'm still talking about how I'm going to get there. And I could call her on the phone and she'd pick up. I could slack her and she would slap me right back. She just was so available and so holding all of us, because there was so much more that got put into this GTP than any other GPP before it. And there was a lot to hold on our side. So for the pod guides to be held the way we are held was just extraordinary. And I know the leaders feel that way. The cohort leaders feel that way as well. But I am amazed by her capacity to hold what she held, content-wise, emotionally, logistically. It's really, really mind-blowing. Really mind-blowing.
I would say that for me, Jan is, the words that come up to me is that she's magical, she's celestial, she's everywhere. And there's a way that she's able to hold all of the logistics, the backbone, the skeleton, the container, answer with grace, respond, anticipate. That I would say that I felt that Jan was like an architect and also handled anything that wasn't yet operating the way that it was originally designed. She could flex it. She could adjust it. She could adapt it. And she was there for all of us and for each of us. So, yeah, so I'm going to love on her in that way. And I got to hang out with Jan at Esalen. So I got to hug her personally, bodily. And I'd say, yeah, grace, dignity, and amazing. And I can talk about all the amazing logistics, but it's not, she did those flawlessly, but it's how she was there for all of us.
It's hard to limit myself to a few words here. And I was part of GTP 7 when Jan wasn't the coordinator of it, and now being part of this GTP when she is. Jan has been the rock. She has been like the one person I can always go to. And there's so many details in this process and so much to hold. And she is always with kindness. I mean, true kindness, there to help, and no judgment for what the fuck, you should have known that. I already said that. No. Jan is just, she is amazing to me. I don't know how her brain works. I don't know how anyone can function and hold everything that she does and organize a process as big as this and as complicated as this in a way that has brought so much support. For me as a type 6, support, that's big. And I felt totally supported by her and her amazing work and her and just her amazing kindness and the gift of her. I was also, and her team, cohort 6. And so just her insights into, when we were listening to people together, and her feedback and her suggestions. I think that Jan is super brilliant, amazing, loving person. And this process of GTP 8 was held together in a way that I just can't even imagine it happening without her.
And as a bonus, I will also include EPP guide Dana Vitarello, who is not on this episode, but I was talking to her on Zoom while I was in the middle of editing this episode. And I said, hey, you want to include a few words of appreciation for Jan Shegda? And here's what she said.
I love Jan. I love working with Jan. I love talking with Jan. I love shooting the shit with Jan. She's one of my absolute favorite people. And I work with her in lots of spaces in EPP, but for GTP 8, we couldn't have run it without her. Like we couldn't. She held all the logistics. She held the bigger picture. She held the punch list. She was updating session plans in the middle. I mean, she was showing up in every cohort and supporting and just literally jumping and pitching in wherever she could. And it went so smooth because we had Jan and her beautiful, meticulous, organized mind. She is so competent and so logical and balances it out with so much heart. And, beautifully, when appropriate, will bring these big, lovely feelings around and is so generous with her love and her appreciation of everyone else. And I love working with Jan. I really do.
So before we get back to the episode, I kind of want to just invite y'all, anybody listening to this, if you can hear my voice, I'm talking to you. If you are connected with us on Slack, feel free to go over to the podcast chat Slack channel and drop a few words of appreciation of your own for Jan Shegda. And if you're not in our Slack channel, then email, Send, you know what? I tell you what, I'll make you a deal. You send an email to info@enneagramprisonproject.org, and I promise you somebody will see it. And if it's not for them, if it's for Jan or anybody else, then they will forward that to the appropriate person. All right, there you go. And I think now we will return to our regularly scheduled programming. We're talking to some of the guides from the most recent guide training program. A really easy starting place is just to tell the listener who you are, anything that you want to include, and name, type if you want, or nothing at all. It's fine. So who are you and what do you do with EPP?
Perfect. I am Dana Dana Deaton, and I am a guide within EPP. I'm a type 2, and as a normal check-in, I use she, her pronouns. But, I also do life coaching. I have a life coaching business, a private practice. And so I do that on the side. And that has become less and less of what I do because I'm doing more and more of EPP.
That's cool. So did you do Enneagram work in your private practice prior to EPP, or did you meet all of them to get what was the connection point for you with the Enneagram and then EPP?
So the Enneagram came to me late. So I started using the Enneagram as a part of my coaching. So they introduced it to us at New Ventures West, which is where I was certified, and got introduced to it there. And they use it as just one of the many tools that they offer or they suggest. And it so intrigued me, and I wanted to know more. And I kept thinking, God, if I could learn more about this thing called the Enneagram, it would be my secret sauce as a part of my coaching business. And then COVID hit, and that brought me into EPP and started the sequence of classes that led me to where I am now. Never did I think I would go this deep in. And
yeah. Can relate, by the way. Been there. Never thought I'd go this deep. Deep. I have a track record of I do things for like 2 or 3 years, and then I bounce to something else. So having been around EPP for longer than 3 years for me is it's magical, and it's fun that I hear people say that frequently. Like, I didn't know what I was getting into. I'm glad I got into it, or didn't think I'd be here that long, or whatever. So,
well, my funny story was that I had met Susan through New Ventures West, and she was the only person I had met. And then I started, just getting more involved in EPP, and started. I decided to take the 9P1K class, and it was fabulous. And it was a pilot at the time. And
what year was that when you took 9P1K?
2019.
Okay. So that was super early in the 9P1K game.
Yeah, actually, it was 2020. It was right during. It was right when COVID happened. It was 2020.
Okay.
It was a pilot program. Susan's boys were a part of the panel. Mm-hmm. It was like homegrown, really incredible, and I just loved it. And there's a chart within EPP that shows this track that you can be on if you would take that, and then you take the Path to Freedom, and then you could. And I looked at that picture and I went, that's not happening to me. That's too much. That's too deep.
Yeah.
And Susan called me and said, we're doing Path to Freedom applications right now. Why aren't you taking it? And I said, oh, well, should I take it?
Yeah.
She goes, I'm not telling you to take it. I go, well, should I take it? She goes, I'm not telling you to take it, but it would be, but if you get your application in by the end of the day, we could consider it. I'm like, okay. So a couple hours later, I got myself into Path to Freedom, and about halfway through Path to Freedom, all of a sudden it dawned on me. It's like, oh God, I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to do this thing called guiding. And I was sucked in.
What is that thing though? What is that? I'm going to do this. What that draw? Like I know what it's like to talk to Susan, and she's very persuasive in the nicest of ways, and it's not aggressive at all, but it's also hard to turn away from, frankly. And then beyond that, this I don't know. It's an attraction to, or a being called to, or whatever phrase you want to say there about, what's the urge to guide, or the desire to just do this thing. What is that?
I mean, that's probably that's the most incredible question of my life. Like, why am I here? What am I doing? It is this thing, like you said, I couldn't turn away from. It is this sense that I'm doing something bigger than me, but that I actually can have a piece of it. I mean, I think that I always struggle with how do I make an impact on the world? I'm just one person. How do I do that? And there was something that told me, because this is before I guided, of course, there was something that told me that this could be that thing where you do have an impact on a person or people, and you can start to change the world. That sounds so it sounds so unrealistic, and it sounds so too big, but it really is this sense of I'm doing something for me while I'm doing something for you while you're doing something for me. It's this reciprocity in this relationship that I could just start to feel that was so beautiful.
Yeah. And it's funny that when you say that about just being one person, and I go back to when I was locked up, and I think Susan was just one person, and she was brought in by a founder of a different program that I was in, who was also just one person. And I think it serves as a nice reminder here that, never underestimate the power of one person.
Right. And I think that never underestimate the power. And then when I started to, it happened in coaching when I would notice my impact or our impact of the relationship and of the conversation that then impacted her or his relationship with his family and his colleagues. And then it's just that kind of domino effect that started to happen. And I would get reports back from people even long after I'd coached them about the impact on their life and all the people around them. And that ripple is real.
Yeah. Love that. So you go through 9P1K, go through Path to Freedom, and then you mentioned the image that you saw with the track. So in that, I know the answer to this. So I'll ask questions that are pretty obvious answers, but I'm asking them for folks who might not know. So 9P1K, then Path to Freedom, and then what is the next step for you after that?
Guide training program, Guide GTP 7 last summer. And it was, a much different kind of application. It felt a lot bigger than Path to Freedom and 9P1K. And there was a lot of discussion from the leads about the faculty and the leads about this is going to be big. This is going to be big. This is going to be a lot. You got to make space in your life. And I'm like, yeah, okay, I got it.
I've done big stuff before. I got
this. I went to a good college. I'm smart. I got this. Never did I think. And I kept thinking when I graduated from my college, that was a big deal. It was a good school. And then I went through New Ventures West, which was a year-long coaching program, which was like a master's program. Mm-hmm. This became almost harder than any of those. The Path to Freedom, harder in the sense that of what it took to participate and what I had to learn. It was like drinking out of a fire hose. And so I started GTP last summer and engaged in one of the most extraordinary 2 months. I'd honestly say one of the most extraordinary 2 months of my life. It was, heart opening, cracking open every part of me, testing every single boundary I'd ever had, pushing me limits wise, sleep wise, everything. It was just really this incredible personal challenge that I just took on and embraced.
The image of drinking from a fire hose is accurate and also hilarious to me. Just I'm picturing this sweet little kid who's just thirsty and just wants to get a little drink, and then gets assaulted by this massively powerful burst of water that they did not intend to encounter.
I just wanted some water. Exactly. Just wanted a little trickle, and then boom. Yeah, it's like, and then you can't stop drinking. You can't turn it away. That's the thing that's so interesting. It's like, okay, more, just give me more. And GTP 7 was just really magical. I had my pod guide was unbelievable. And I kept remembering thinking, I had Scott as my pod guide. He allowed us, and Jason was in my pod with me. I just really credited him with so much of the holding, of pulling us through that class, because you'd go to class for two days, 3 hours a piece, and then you'd have a pod meeting where you could just kind of go, oh, like, what are we doing? Like, what I have so many questions, and he kind of would piece us all together again.
So that's actually that's where you answered the question almost before I even asked it, because that's the next question for me is as a participant, and then I have some questions for you as having gone through it as a pod guide, but as a participant when you went through GTP, what is the thing? I mean, what do the pod meetings do? I mean, what you have class, you have your homework, you have your not exercises, but like your assignments and all this, and are the pod meetings to get clarity around that stuff, or is it more like, this is hard, I need help, or is it just like talking to a friend because you need consoling because it's harder than you thought it was going to be, or what happens in those pod meetings?
So the pod meetings, I would say, just based on what you just said, it's all of it, and it's absolutely critical. It's the glue for me that kept me together. I can go to school and I can go to meetings like we did with the cohort sessions. Those were great. Those were easy-ish. And then the homework and the LMS, you stay up on it, but those are all individual. Those are all, you're doing it on your own. The pod meetings were where you could come be with other people who are going through exactly the same, course that you were going through, and share all of our experiences, which were all different. And then Scott would really help to kind of assimilate everything that was going on for us and give us that guidance, those nuggets, those golden moments where he would just say, and then think about this, or this is how it is on the inside, or, don't worry about that. He made everything okay. It just calmed all of us down, and the connection in those pod meetings was extraordinary. And that was the intimacy that, you get really intimate with your cohort, but it's not the same as in the pod. And the holding that went on there, that's where a lot of the growth happened.
And in your pod, it's 3 or 4 people. It's something like that.
Mine was 6.
Relatively small.
Relatively small. Yeah. Yeah.
You still keep in touch with those folks?
I keep in touch with like half of them. Yeah. We lost 2 people at the end of the session, unfortunately.
Yeah.
It's a lot. We lost a lot of people last year at the end, towards the second month. So
we have a word for that. Attrition.
Attrition.
Because it will happen. It's you start off with, X number of people, and at the end it will be X minus a certain number of people. It's just how it is. Always. Every
absolutely. Group. And it's so for the right reasons too. Yeah. It's just not where they're meant to be at that moment.
Yeah. And they'll say often, I can't, or I don't, right. I no longer want to, or the list of reasons is it's not short, but I have a lot of respect for someone who can say, you know what, I thought, and now I think differently. And so,
there's that magnetic pull that you really feel like, oh, I should do this, or I need to do this, or everyone else is doing this, I should stay. So I honored the 2 women who we lost, who could have left the program in the second month because it was not right for them.
So one more question about going through GTP as a participant, and then we'll bounce forward to GTP 8. Do you remember, are there any assignments in particular that stuck out, or anything to do with homework or presentations or feedback or anything in that process when you think of GTP 7 that sticks out to you as that was tough and I'm glad it happened?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm smiling because I think one of my answers. So one of the assignments that we did, it was during the DEI and B section. We actually did a homework assignment on bias. What's your bias? And that was pretty confronting for me. I think of myself as a pretty open-minded, pretty accepting person. And I was shocked at my biases, at how many I had. I didn't realize that there were as many biases as there were on this list. So I think what was really kind of revealing to me was that even when I didn't believe I was biased, I was potentially being biased. And so that was a very confronting homework assignment, and really eye-opening, and it let me put down a lot of my attachments to stuff that I didn't realize I had. So that was just a really great clarity. It was a kind of a clearing of kind of some of the garbage that I had going on in my life that I didn't realize I had. So that was lovely. I would say the other most memorable was in the second month in breakout rooms, we do presentations. It's the time when we start to present. And at the time we would get a heads up of who was going to be in your room. And I had in my room, I was going to be presenting, I don't remember what I was presenting, but it was going to be with Susan and with you, Clay. And for me, it just felt really intimidating, try to do it in front of Susan and then you, who I didn't know as well. And it was one of the scariest things I've ever done. And I got in, did it. And at the end, Susan said, "Hey, can you put down your notes and just give me 3 minutes, completely ad lib?" And I did it. And I remember being done. And then the feedback started and you said, "There you are. Mm-hmm. There you are." And it was just this really beautiful moment because I was so attached to the script and to what I had written and to the prep that I had done and all the good student Dana parts of it. And you just honored the fact that it's like, there you are. That's what we want. Yeah. And yeah.
And we talk frequently about, connection before content and showing up and being there and, and then I say often that it's what doesn't matter if I'm not listening with you or to you. And if I'm not connected with you, and I'm just out. And okay. I love that suggestion from, or perhaps request from Susan to just push all the, I'm speaking, I'm paraphrasing, but basically shove all the content to the side and just talk to me and see what shows up. And surprise, Dana showed up.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
We love it.
That's right. And it's, and even that concept of, there you are, Dana showed up. It's still it's work in progress. It is work to recognize that that's what's needed, not only for the person listening and the students on the inside, participants, wherever. It's for me. It's like, that's when I feel at my most authentic and at peace. Yeah.
It's good. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
So going through GTP as a pod guide, what are some of the things that you expected that either did happen or didn't happen? Some things that were different or exactly what you thought, or how was it going through GTP 8, not as a participant, but as a guide?
When Dana first asked me, it was one of those moments that I was really honored. Really honored, just because I knew how important that role was for me last summer. So it was first like this, oh my gosh, this is so incredible. And oh my God, how am I going to do that for somebody else? How am I going to be that person? And I got a smaller little pod. It was just a pod of 4. And right off the bat, one of my pod members' family had some family issues, and we were dealing with that right off the bat, and trying to hold that as well as holding the pod. And she ended up having to leave the program, all the right reasons, and helping her navigate that. And then we had a little pod of 3. So it was like a little mighty group. And I think at first there was a little disappointment on their part that we were such a small little group. And it really became the magic in the group. And trying to hold this space to help teach and guide and let them learn how to do this stuff, but not have it be awkward or uncomfortable or forced, was this really interesting balance that we had to go through. And we found it. And we were, it was probably one of the most fulfilling, opening, for me as well. The personal development that I went through in the course over the course of GTP 8 was actually really shocking. I kept thinking, I'm here to be a pod guide. I'm here to lead. I'm here to impart my knowledge. And it's just such bullshit. Every time I do that, it's so not the case. That's not why I'm here. Like when you said, oh, there you are, I'm here to show up as me. And when I'm me, they can be them. So it was this discovery of parts of myself, getting introduced to parts of myself for the first time that I didn't even know existed. And when that happens, people that are around me can be who they are supposed to be. And it's that reciprocity again. It's that beautiful reciprocity, but it's not until I show up did it really occur.
That came up with one of the conversations I had with one of the other guides, and it's everything that we talk about when we say why we're guides, or why you're a guide instead of a teacher, or a leader, or whatever language that is commonly used in most places that we just don't use. And if we say it, it's no big deal. But it's you're a guide, and you're not there to carry people through everything for them. It's make space, stand shoulder to shoulder, and walk with them.
That's right.
Which is
walk with them and get really curious, and help them get curious about things that they had held as really very static, black and white kind of places in their life, that this is the way that I am, or this is not what I do, or this is what I do. And getting curious with them about some of those emphatic, this is it. They started to soften. You could see this softening, this opening, this is how it changes for me. And I saw transformation in my pod that was extraordinary. Extraordinary. It's
hilarious how fast 30 minutes goes by. And
I know.
It's been nice seeing you around and being in GTP with you. I was pretty active this time around too. And so anyways, I don't want to take up more of your time, but just to turn the mic over to you and share with the listener what's on your heart, anything that you would like to say to perhaps a future guide or somebody who might be considering something like this.
I think that there's a couple of things that just come to mind right off the top, where it's mostly about where I find myself in a community that I would never normally have been a part of. And I'm one of those people, if I'm not digging on something, you mentioned this earlier, I'll bounce. I'll just like find my way out of it pretty quickly. And not only have I not run away, not only have I not left any part of EPP, but I just keep finding ways to go deeper. And it is really not even a choice. It is a draw. It is a pull for me into an organization. I always talk about it as the cult without the lemonade. There's no lemonade here. And I love that because I so respect the people that are a part of it and why they're a part of it. But we're leading together with our eyes wide open. There's no magical person behind the curtain, so to speak. The draw that keeps continuing to pull me into this organization is real, and it's significant, and it's based on so many different experiences that I've had. So certainly experiences on the inside. There's nothing that compares with the conversation, the revelation, the beautiful moments that we get to have on the inside, both profoundly sad and profoundly kind of opening. And so that's certainly what keeps drawing me back in. But it's the exchanges that I get to have within EPP with all kinds of different people from all different kinds of walks of life who are all in this for all different reasons. And I would say that my exposure to and my experience with and my relationships with some of the ambassadors is some of the most, I was a coach of one of the ambassadors. That's how I got connected to EPP for a year and a half. My relationships with the ambassadors is precious to me. Really, really precious to me. And it is kind of the lifeblood of this organization for sure. And it is, I think for me being in GTP, I probably pushed myself harder than I've ever pushed myself. And if you're in a situation, if someone's in a situation where they're really curious about this work, being ready to get pushed and really to stretch is it's a really cool place to do it, because it's a gift to yourself. I know that this has been a gift to me. And as a type 2, that's not something I'm really good at. And to really find that space for me and to learn, and knowing that there's this reciprocity, knowing that there's this place that I can give back to, and I'm going to get more from, and I'm going to give back to. And it just keeps on. It's like this beautiful kind of cycle that we need in the world of goodness, of authenticity, of love. It's just love.
So thank you, Clay. I'm Stella. I work with type 7, she, her pronouns. And how did I come to EPP? It's been about, I'm going to say over 3 years now, and started more as a coach, working with ambassadors, and then getting invited to Reconnecting, which was a gift to meet so many involved in EPP. And then continued because it just invited me in as to most recently being a guide.
So you came in, that's an interesting entry point. You came in as you were a coach in our coaching program with the ambassadors. And were you already using the Enneagram before you came to EPP, or was there what's your history with the Enneagram?
Thank you, Clay. Yeah. So I was introduced to the Enneagram when I was certified coaching with New Ventures West. So I had some exposure to the Enneagram, and I was intrigued taking courses at the Enneagram narrative tradition. And so while there, I was reintroduced to EPP because I had met Susan Lessick at a New Ventures West class, but I'm on the East Coast. So I thought, hey, it's not that easy. I'm in the New York area. And so it was always there, but never as accessible. And so I met Jason at the narrative tradition and taking some courses there, and became certified there concurrently as I was certifying as a guide with Enneagram Prison Project.
That's a lot of work. That's a lot to do in a small, and I'm understating that. And I think just for the listener who might not know, that's a whole lot in a small amount of time when you're doing that side by side. Or is it? I don't know. I don't want to speak for you.
It is. And at the same time, it's connected, right? So there's a theme that connects it and a community that goes across. And so, yes, it is a lot of work, because it also is not just work in a methodology or work in learning something. It's inner work on oneself, right? And it's inner work on oneself as an individual, and it's working together with others collectively. And so to your point, Clay, holding that space as one is continuing to grow and witness one another growing, it is a lot of work, and it's deep and profound, and not necessarily fragmented and divided and broad, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does make sense. And what I'm hearing is a thing that I've heard a few times, actually, where it's this idea of, it's not just about learning content. I'm not just reading a book and memorizing some definitions and some ideas and some other stuff. I'm working on myself through this process. And that is, that's different. Most, I don't know, at least in the States, our educational style is, give me information. Who I am doesn't matter. Just give me the information. And that doesn't seem to be true with the work that we do. Mm-hmm. So, information is important. You got to have the content, but it's working on yourself and getting to that point to where you can make those connections to share that content with the folks who are there, who need it. Frankly, is that a fair? Am I restating that fairly or accurately?
Yeah, you are. And then something that you said, Clay, that I really I heard was, sort of it's working on who I am, right? It's not working on what I do. And that's really a distinction, right? Because what I do is one thing, but who I am is how I am. And when we connect with one another heart to heart, it's also seeing myself. So it can be a little scary, which is why trust and support And as we started this conversation, protecting or not protecting, but listen, my word, protecting, right? We're really thinking about respecting my boundaries.
Yeah.
And yet sometimes we realize in this work, I am protecting certain things.
Yeah.
And when do I sense and feel it safe within me and then with each other, right? And the respect that we are in this work together is that we are discovering, we are exploring. And so that is unique to this work. There's not so much a hierarchy, that there's an expert teacher, and hence the word guide.
Right.
Right. And so that to me makes a real difference in how we explore who we are, how we are, and who we will be.
You went through GTP, was it 7 as a participant?
I did. Yes. 7. Remember, type 7, GTP 7.
Yeah. So what are some of the differences going through GTP 7 as a participant and going through GTP 8 as a guide? I would imagine that's a very different experience.
Oh, yeah. Yes. First of all, one is in such a different place, right? So as a participant, the nervousness, what's this going to be like? It's unfolding, right? It's unfolding. And being a participant in GTP 7, there was something also to trust, to feel the magic, to allow it to be and to unfold. And there was, I'm not going to, oh my gosh, am I going to perform? Am I going to meet the needs? I don't like the word feedback. And I think it's because of my corporate experience.
Right.
I feel like there's a rating. So I've gotten over that, but it's still, I cringe a little bit. And so but yet at the same time in GTP 7 being held, right? And being held that it is about practicum. It is about being safe for others. And I would say as a participant, when I compare it to GTP 8, in GTP 8 as a guide, I knew where we were going. Do you know what I'm saying? Like I knew the map, right? The session plans, where we're supposed to be. Whereas as a participant, I'm exploring in a different way.
Gotcha.
And in GTP 8, I was really impressed as a guide to also see how much we learned in GTP 7 that would create a much more clear, robust, not disciplined in a way that was constrictive, but more structure to GTP 8 that provided more support for the participants than we might have experienced in GTP 7.
Any examples come to mind on that?
Yeah, some of the examples were around clarity of pacing the homework. I'll admit, when I was in GTP 7,
there's a lot of homework, by the way. This is they literally is a homework tracker. That's how much homework there is.
Yes. Yeah. There's a lot of homework. And so in GTP 7, it's all due. I was I could procrastinate in that without feeling or sensing that. And I realized in retrospect, it would have been good if I had done it more along the way. So in GTP 8, there's more self-empowerment of accountability, of tracking your assignments. There's the pod sessions, which are the smaller groups that you actually review and get to share your homework together. So much more transparency of, I'd say, peer support in sharing. What am I learning? How am I approaching this? And we had our pods in GTP 7, and they were wonderfully supportive. What we added in GTP 8 was a little more of the review of the logistics and the support around what is due, when it is due, and to share more transparently the components of each other's homework.
Gotcha. So it's more light is shined for the participant on what the hell is happening. Basically.
Yeah, I would think so. Although I'm sure if I talk to a participant in GTP 8, they'll probably describe it just like I did GTP 7, right? Because I can't describe it for someone as a participant.
Yeah.
Right?
And also, I mean, it's you've been through it too. So not only are you a guide, but you've been through it as a participant. And anytime you do something, the more you do it, the more familiar you get, with the process. So it would make sense for a participant to still potentially feel a little bit of maybe being not lost. That's too big of a word, but just like not knowing like what's What's around the corner? And do they have do the participants have access to a master syllabus or a plan, or like, do they know what weeks which things are happening, or are they told like as the time comes? How does that work for the participants?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, we all receive, participants included, a syllabus.
Okay.
And the syllabus does have week by week the general topics, right, that are going to happen. And they also receive the assignments ahead of time. What is due when? And something that we also learned is probably even before GTP 9 kicks off is have some of those meetings earlier, because it's a lot to just start and then you're getting everything that's due. And it's not all due at the same time, but you see what homework's due, you see what practicums are there. There's still clarity though, right? And you know, we all are drawn to this work, to want to make a difference. So to invest, right? Because to be in guide training, I've gone through 9P1K, I've done Path to Freedom, I've applied for this, and I'm committing to the work on me, with others. And then upon, I guess, graduating, I don't know what word I would use.
Yeah, I think that works.
That I think, I go to apprenticeship, right? So even then there's more of apprenticing. So ensuring that we are all doing our own work so that we are safe as we open up to do work with others, right? That is so critical. And so part of the training, we can sometimes get caught up in the performance of what's due when, and we can give as much clarity of that. And so the more that we can make that framework as clear as possible, then it is the container that we can do our own work within while we are continuing our work and we're preparing to guide others, right? So we're doing there's a continuum of the work that's going on, I guess I'd say.
Yeah. And you said, I want to go back to a word that you said it a couple of times, actually, talking about the practicum. And a lot of folks who listen to the podcast will know that we're using the same language. A lot of folks are already doing this stuff. So there's a lot of language that we use that they don't require explanation. And then there's also the small chance that there's somebody who's listening who doesn't know anything. This might be the first time they've listened even to the podcast. And so for that person, could you give a brief overview, like what exactly is a practicum? And you mentioned earlier about the feedback and some other things. What goes on in the practicums?
Yes. So there's, I've used the word homework, practice, practicum, right? So homework is something that I'm achieving and I'm getting some feedback on, but it's feedback that's, my learning, pure learning, right? I'm practicing certain skills and I'm also getting some feedback from a few of my colleagues, my peers from the guides. And then I move into practicum. And so practicum is much more, I am actually now teaching. I'm actually now guiding portions of the modules. I'm guiding with someone else. I'm actually in a practicum doing what I would do guiding. And it's abbreviated because it's might be 20 minutes, half an hour. And in that, as I prepare for that, I do that. I am ensuring that I have the EPP curriculum and I'm bringing myself to that, my story, my work, who and how I am in this. And when I do that, I have others that witness my doing that in a supportive way. Many times there are ambassadors who join us, which is wonderful. There are other guides and there are others from the cohort of the guide training. And once I do that, I pause to actually give myself feedback first. How did I do? Is there a growth edge for me? What did I do that I really felt I did well? So self-reflection and self-awareness is so critical because as a guide, there will be times I may need to stop in the middle of guiding to say, ooh, where am I? How am I right now? What am I doing well? Pause, reflect. And so that reflection of my growth edge and what I did well, then hearing the same feedback on those parameters. What is it that worked? Where are there some areas for an edge of growth from an ambassador? That's a gift. What's it like to do this in custody? How might I be received from my colleagues and from guides? And so I take that, and that feedback I take and I own in my own way of self-development. I actually record that feedback for me, and I practice. And in the next practicum, I hope to address some of that. The practicums are different, not only because of the feedback. If I did not do a certain level of readiness in the practicum, I then get to redo the practicum. So what's very important in the practicum is they are, I would say, areas of an approved or no, you're not ready, a redo. But you do have the opportunity to redo with a beautiful feedback. And so I'd say that's the practicum. Is that helpful, Clay?
100%. And there's a few things that I know about it, and for whatever reason, I'm hearing for the first time now that I just really love about the way that we do that. First is the self-reflection. So to paint the picture, you might have 4 people, 5 people in a breakout, and then you have the person doing their presentation or their lesson, and then after that, everybody else will give feedback, but it starts with the person who did it, and how do you feel about that? And it's in real time. What do you think? And we have a structure. It's what do you think you do well? Like you said, what do you think you did well? What would you like to do differently? And it's actually really cool to see people in the moment assessing what they just did, because now all the nerves are gone. There might be some kind of adrenaline dump for some people that happened. Everybody experiences things differently, and then we move on to other folks, giving their feedback, and we follow that same structure. What we thought you did well, what we thought you could use, an area of improvement. And there's always one of each. There should be.
Yes.
And if you can't listen to somebody talk for 20 minutes and have at least one of each, I don't think you were listening. That's just my perspective or my opinion. And then, so that's one thing I love about it. And then something else that I heard is, without you saying it, what I heard you said was it's a pass or a redo, which is massively different than pass or fail.
Yes.
There is no fail. It's not you didn't get an F and now go home, you failed. Here's a thing where you can improve, and we think you can, we think you will if you implement this feedback. It's so different than a typical learning experience or a typical practicing experience. No failure.
Yeah. No, and part of that is when you join that with what is it that we're looking for, right? And so it is the ability to be present. Content is a component, but it's not the only component, right? We're also, are you present here? Are you able to create a safe container? Are you engaging the others in this, right? Does it feel authentic? And so we do, we use the term, and others may have said the rubric, which is this way to actually
I think you're the first one to bring it up, actually. Did you?
Are you serious?
Yeah. And you're the first one to say, unless my memory is failing, which I don't think it is, you might be the first one to bring it up, was talking about the rubric. So there's a scary word. What the hell is a rubric?
Oh, man. I'm like looking at, where is a rubric that I can refer to?
Yeah.
Because so I would say that the rubric, when we look at giving feedback, it also is against some certain expected, I'm going to use the word capabilities, competencies, that as a guide that I would be seeking to hold myself accountable to. And when I look at those, it's not like to your point, I pass or fail or I ever arrive, because how I am in each session may look a little different each time, right? So as a guide, I could be looking at feeling that I held presence in this session. Next, the following week, I could say, oh my gosh, I had so much trouble being present. So the beauty of something like the rubric is, can I locate myself? Right. Similar to when we talk about above, below the line.
Right.
Can I locate myself where I am? And so when we look at it, we call it, actually, I'm looking at it now, the universal observation of how we did. So, so I look at, and this is, I'm just looking at now is, can I manage the logistics? Can I technically share the screen? Can I upload files? Because as we're guiding, particularly in custody, there's a lot of logistics that need to be handled and respected. Homework, getting it back to participants on time. Because if we don't, and like now we're in lockdown, there are participants who never got their homework back, which breaks my heart.
Yeah.
So the accountability that operations is not just something administrative. It's also a container of holding technical capability to serve, right? The presence we talked about, the community of EPP, and holding a safe container, and content. And then am I self-aware? So the beauty of that is we can look at this and say, these are key to me being able to really be present and relevant. And I hate to use the word effective, but I guess I'd say of joining and inviting to do this work and making it safe to do it.
Yeah. I like effective, for the record. I'll go with you. I'll go with you with what you said instead of that. But just for the record, I was on board with that when you said it.
Thank you.
I kind of, when you explain the practicum and talking about the feedback and how all that works, I remember I've been a part of a lot of those, and I enjoy it. It's one of the things that I love doing as an ambassador. It's one of my favorite things, actually. Sometimes it's a little uncomfortable, frankly, because there are some very unpleasant things that I feel like needs to be said. And sometimes I'll use some real loose language here, just saying that if somebody totally bombs, it's not going to serve them to ignore that. And it's not my job to make them feel better if they do bomb. And what is my job is to be there with them and support them as they grow into the guide that we believe that they can be. So if they use phrases or slang, I got to say, hey, that's don't do that in prison, especially. Or if they completely miss a content piece, then so while there is a lot of support there, it can be unpleasant and uncomfortable, some of the feedback that we give. So as a guide, and you're holding this for the participants, and in particular in your pod, how does that look from your perspective when you know that someone struggled and then got some ouchy feedback, shall we say?
Yeah. It's I think for so many of us in our society, when there's something that we didn't achieve or do in a way that we believed needed to meet a standard, right? So it gets back to something we talked about earlier, our academic, our school, right? Things come up for us. And so if I didn't do something well, then I'm bad, right? So it's really separating the behavior or something that I said from who I am. And, I when you're talking, Clay, I was just thinking we're inviting to a cultural competence that I can appreciate being inclusive, that I can understand who am I speaking to and their experience, right? We talk a lot about, diversity, equity, inclusion, right? Belonging. That's where the feedback makes the difference, is we're being invited to understand how is it to ensure that we're not unintentionally, and I'll use the word unintentionally, creating a barrier that will affect the ability for us to credibly engage in inner work. Because the invitation is not to take notes and pass an exam when we're guiding. It's not. It's actually an invitation to say, can you put your personality aside a little bit? Can you maybe open up a little bit the armor there to have a vulnerability to love yourself, to have compassion for yourself? So the feedback, Clay, when it's given, even in something like operations or language or lack of presence, it is because the work is about being able to be present, open, supportive. And knowing that, it's the ouch it's a bigger ouch if I go into those spaces without awareness. Yeah. And it's not even an ouch on them though, Clay. It's right. Because part of it is, think about, we're going in with populations that already have a vulnerability. So why should I trust you?
Right.
And you come in and you haven't done your own work, or you're not aware of that. So I think the awareness is so critical. And the way that it's delivered, I've been in those feedback sessions with you. I know it's hard sometimes to not, we're so used to telling everybody, wow, you did great.
Well, that's what you want to do. Oh, I loved it. You're awesome. Thumbs up. Like, that's what you want to do.
and the issue is, maybe I was thumbs up on Tuesday and I crashed on Thursday. Yeah. So, it's not like, that's the issue too, with which is what I love about the self-observation. Right. So even as an apprentice, these rubrics don't go away. Right. So you're looking at how am I doing at certain intervals? Mm-hmm. Because we go up and down. We do. And that's, I think, bringing awareness and intention. So if I make an ouch, I can pause and go, I'm sorry. Like, whoa, what just happened here? Right. That if I can acknowledge, I misstepped in a moment. I don't know. To me, that opens the bridge of our humanity. Yeah.
And you're also demonstrating that this is what it looks like when I have the freedom to use a little more colorful language here. Like, if I fuck up, and then I can immediately say, hey, I fucked up. Like, you're demonstrating to other people how to go about that, because we ultimately all fuck up. And that's just life. Like you said, that's the humanity in it, because
it is. And it's a difference, right? Yeah. I fucked up. I am not a fuck up. There's a difference.
Big difference. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because the action is just a misstep. But as a person, I'm okay. Like, I am not an accident. I just made it. Right. I just made it. Oopsie. I'm not the oopsie.
Yes. And that's what we have to remind ourselves of. And it's hard, right? Yeah. That's hard. So to do that with caring, and again, in the practicum, there's a redo.
Yeah.
So
and the redo will happen as many times as it needs to, and until it's there. And there never is a failure. There's not a failing grade. There's nothing like that. It's just a more invitation to keep working, which is
absolutely.
Is really good.
And then I think what also happens is I'm responsible. So as a participant, as a guide, I have autonomy. I have agency. And so I may at some point say, ooh, I don't know that I'm ready yet. And that's okay. I'll help you get ready. But it's not a fail. But I may also say, and I remember with some of the guides that I work with will say, whoa, I'm not able to be here today. I'm not ready for this session. There's so much going on in my life. I need more support.
It's nice to hear from other guides who go through this process, both as a participant, obviously, and now as a guide, because as much as I know about EPP and how things are, I haven't experienced everything. I'm not a guide. I'm an ambassador with a lot of years under my belt, but there are things that I just don't know and I can't explain to people. So thank you for sitting and explaining all those things to folks who are curious. I'm convinced that people do listen with quite a bit of curiosity about all the things that we do. So with that, I'll just say thank you, and thank you again. And any closing thoughts from you? You get the final word here. I'm going to literally turn off my mic and just turn the floor over to you with anything that you'd like to say to the listener or to anybody.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you, Clay, as an ambassador who was with us through so much of GTP 8, and all the ambassadors who I also felt were guides. Yeah, guides, maybe of a different sort, but are guides in this work. And I think we all can guide in different levels. So the ambassadors, I thank each one of you for all that you are and be. And I would say for the participants, for the courage, right? And I just thought of this today, and I encourage, so with courage and encourage together, that this work is always organic and starting, and has such a purpose of the heart. And so when I think of the GTP in particular, I feel like we've opened a legacy of energy, of commitment. I can close my eyes and see the cohort 6 and see everyone and the courage that each person brought and the support to one another and the opening and the maybe tripping up a little bit and then lifting themselves up. And so I feel excited. I see the possibilities. I see the expansion. I see the commitment. And so I just want to thank everyone who's participating. And I encourage for those who are thinking about guide training. We say it's not for the faint of heart, but it is for those that have a heart. And there's a resilience, but there's not, there's an invitation.
I'm Deb, type 6. I use she, her pronouns. That's it. That's how we always introduce ourselves.
Yep.
And I'm glad to be here, Clay. I'm glad that I was able to take part in GTP 8 and as a pod guide, and I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. And you're a guide with EPP, and you were a pod guide, as you said, in GTP 8. Is this your first time being a pod guide in the guide training program, or have you done that previously?
I was also a pod guide last year for GTP 7, and so I knew going in, like, the growth opportunities for me that would be there. You know, that it's easy for me. I think I talked with Dana and Suzanne about this before, before doing it. It's easy for me to be a cheerleader and, the coach part of it. If you those are the two aspects I feel like we're holding, being a cheerleader and encouraging, and also being a coach and providing, hopefully really helpful and supportive feedback for how to improve. And so it was like that. It was a really great opportunity. And I felt like, for me personally, it's everything with EPP feels like an opportunity to do my own inner growth and inner work in community together. So certainly this was that for me. And the biggest delight of all, though, is just being a part of the team. My particular pod, we were pod A, which immediately when I saw that, I thought pod awesome. And we were pod awesome. It was really such a great group. And we had a really good time together. And then the Suzanne and Don and Jan and Stella and I as a team too, was just delightfully fun being with them.
Yeah, I bet. And it's interesting. The first thing that you mentioned is about your own opportunity for personal growth, and this is a common thread that has come up with, I believe, everybody so far. Is yeah, you're there. You're a guide, so you're helping the next batch of prospective guides come through, but you're not just there as a source of information, or you're not just there as the head of the class, kind of running things or anything like that. You're there and experiencing your own growth in the process. And it's kind of cool. And it's also super unusual, because I don't think that's typical in most forms of education. I think I'll say, like, you wouldn't see a lot of teachers saying, well, here I am teaching third grade again, and I'm surprised at all the things that I learned, because that's just not how it works, right? So
Yeah.
how does that work? Why is it that if you're there as a guide and you're there for the new folks, how do you see that inner work in your own life, the potential, the opportunities kind of showing up? Where is there time for that? If you're grading homework and doing all the other stuff that comes along with being a guide, where's there room for that?
Well, I don't know. I just feel like if there isn't room for that, then I don't want to be doing it, because I know I haven't arrived. And I've got, and to me, it also feels like the bigger culture of EPP. It's part of the reason why I love being involved with EPP. And it's a community of people, when the women I've met at Shakopee Women's Prisons where I've taught, and all the other people involved in the EPP, it's just a community of people who are interested in being honest with looking inside and seeing what's there, having the courage not to turn away from that. And we're all just on a journey together doing our own work, and nobody's arrived, nobody's there. So it feels like it fits. Like it wouldn't work if it was the other way around, because as you know, as most people listening to this podcast know, we do the work together. And that's what it means, And the other day I was, type 6, I can go to places of lots of worrisome thoughts or angst or whatever. So, I'm laying there in bed and I'm thinking about, I was having some negative thoughts about this podcast, and me participating and what am I going to say and that type of thing. And the thing that came to me was, one of the biggest things this is about to me is self-compassion. And I love encouraging other people towards self-compassion, but it didn't hit me right away that, okay, in this moment, can I show my self-compassion? First it's like a whole another deeper level of, it's okay. It's okay if it's not perfect. It's okay. I don't know. So self-compassion, I feel like, is a big theme for EPP, and it's a really big theme in GTP 8 and all the guide training programs that I've been a part of. Because you see, it's hard. It's really hard. And you know that from being a big part of it yourself. And oh gosh, there's so many opportunities for self-compassion for all of us, but especially the unbelievably awesome people who are in the process and who are actually doing the practicums and getting feedback all the time. And
Yeah, I'd like to talk. I think maybe in a future episode we'll chat with some of the participants and see, what it's like from their perspective. I actually kicked around the idea of doing that for this episode some, but they're so fresh out of it, and actually some of them are still doing redos, and I don't want to. They've been through enough.
Yeah, no kidding. Okay, so that could be part 2. This could be part 1, and I would love that. Would be great to hear from them.
I like it, part 2, and that just might be the next episode. I never know. I usually don't know what the next episode is going to be until the current one is finished. But I think that one makes the most sense, and yeah, they have had a busy couple of months. And, going through GTP, it's an interesting thing to see. And I've experienced it from my perspective, which is that of an ambassador and not as a guide, not as a participant. And, there's a lot that goes on in GTP that's unlike anything else I've experienced, elsewhere. So like the practicums, practicing, a lot of the participants are doing centering practices. They're leading in a centering practice for the first time. And there's a lot of things that are different here. What would you say as like a brief overview for somebody who might be listening for the first time and doesn't know what the guide training program is? What would you say? Just a brief summary of what exactly goes on. It's a couple months long. I don't know exactly how many weeks it is, but what are those participants going through?
Well, as you were talking, the thing that kept popping into my mind is everything all at once, because there is pre-work, and I think in next versions of GTP we might have more pre-work, but there are books, there's reading, there's a bunch of stuff to do ahead of time, and then jumping right in. I mean, I think we did have a technology orientation ahead of time, but that, just aside from everything else, all of the technology that we use and all of the tracking that we use, that we ask them to do their own version of, because that's what we do when we're teaching in jails and prisons, that type of tracking with, homework and just attendance. And there's there's Marco Polo, there's Slack, there's Google Drive. I don't know what else am I forgetting, Clay. I mean, there's so many things that, that layer is heavy. And then there is the part about, I mean, the Enneagram, we know that they've been through our 2 classes. And so we know they know some about the Enneagram, but there's paneling. Some people haven't done any paneling before. So there's teaching about paneling. There's teaching about holding, creating the container. It's amazing to me how much is in that 2-week time period or that 2-month time period. It's amazing to me. And so to be taking in a lot of information, and then one of the biggest things that we do at EPP, which I did before EPP, and part of the reason I love EPP is that we talk about what's right about you. And we talk about the looking inside and what is that true self, the part of you that shines, what is that light inside of you that shines, and divine spark, or whatever words you might want to use, to really honestly look at that and start with that. I think that's what undergirds everything and kind of saves it from being a disaster for everybody, because we can always come back to, when we run up against our shortcomings and, our overwhelms and all that stuff. I mean, that's the anchor, that we can come back to. So I don't know if I'm answering thoroughly or not, but those are just a few thoughts.
Yeah, for sure. And I took a peek at one of the trackers, and I think it's 14 sessions, which are typically twice a week. And so with there's a break in there. So it is basically, it's like 7 or 8 weeks, something like that. Once it starts, that doesn't include the pre-work and stuff like that. Something that you said there, and I kind of want to go deeper on this, just to understand. You talking about what's good about, or what's right about us. But to use myself as an example, because that's I'm okay being in the spotlight here. It's easy for me to know what I do that's not good. It's easy for me to know how I show up in the world that's unpleasant, or where I'm an asshole, or where I'm a jerk, or it's so easy to just pinpoint a thing that I don't like about myself and try to stop doing it. What's hard is to say, what do I do well? Why do people like me? And so just from my limited perspective, if I'm thinking in terms of energy, if it's easy to do the one thing and hard to do the other, where is the value, or why is it better? Why is it EPP's approach to focus on what's right about me when it's so easy to see all the negative things about me? Why is that?
Well, why is that? I'm just curious. I mean, I have something to say, but why do you think?
I don't know. I mean, the part of my process was being shown all the negative traits that people see in me, and I had to agree with that. And for the record, I agree with our approach, and I support our approach, and I'm glad that's how we do it. So I'm being a little bit of a devil's advocate
okay.
with the question.
That's good.
Which is hopefully obvious, and if it's not, then I just said it.
No,
and
obvious.
So, but to me, it was like arrogant, condescending, all these things that my mom and I talked about in a previous episode, actually. And I had to agree with that, and I had to face the reality of who I was. And the irony is I already knew that. I just didn't care. So at the point where I started caring, that's where I started looking for solutions. So what I didn't know is, I'm a type 5, and what I didn't know about type 5 in general, or me specifically, is the goodness that existed inside of me, and which are there's a long list of things that are good about me, and that are good about type 5 in general, and that are good about all people. Yeah. And so, but it's still easier for me to just go, hey, I'm being an asshole. Let's stop being an asshole. That's easier than saying, how do I find the light and help it shine more brightly?
Yeah, well, I think they're super connected, like two sides of the same coin, the same thing, really, almost. Because, I mean, if I'm like you, and I think probably many of us are. What we see first is our shortcomings. I mean, that's what we know. I know it about myself. But what I did before, and I think what's different about the approach that we take is that I saw it, I judged it, and I tried to push it away. I didn't embrace it. And so to have that kind of compassion for myself as I sit with the pain of my whatever it is, to really imagine and feel that I can hold my own pain and hold myself with compassion and look at my fear. And I had this experience one time. It was kind of like in my imagination, but I think of it as like an imaginative prayer, but I saw myself as a young person, like maybe, I don't know how old, 7 or 8 or something, but what I saw in my mind's eye was myself pushing up a manhole cover in the street, and I was peering out, and I was scared, and I saw the fear in my eyes. And so I imagined myself going over and sitting down on the street next to myself and talking, and then ended up crawling down into the sewer, sitting next to myself, and like, what is it? What are you afraid of? What is, just talking and having compassion for that little person who was me. And that's the difference. I feel like that's what we're inviting when we look at the parts of us that are hard and make us assholes or whatever, like that is, there's something behind that. And it is us usually trying to cover up our divine spark. It's the mimic of the divine spark. And there's a really good reason. There's a really good reason for it. And it protected us. I mean, this is nothing new that you haven't heard before. It's not new to anyone probably listening to this podcast, but it's so true. And if we can really hold that pain and have compassion for ourselves, then that's where, that's where my growth really continues. And I think that GTP8, gosh, that's like, you've got so much going on. The participants have, and the guides too, have so much to do. And it was easy for me to like fall into overwhelm, as a guide, not a participant. And then can I see that part of myself, have compassion for that, and then come to a place of trust, like, okay, I'm not going to let this overwhelm stop me like sometimes it does. That was one nice little spot in GTP8 for me where I'm like, no, I'm just not going to believe that overwhelm. I'm just going to keep going. It's okay.
That sounds like something that requires practice. Nope, I'm just not going to believe that.
It is. Oh God, yes, it does. It requires a lot of practice. I remember my first Enneagram teacher, Anne Marie, who's a local person here, who's just an amazing person. At one of the classes I took from her, she said, when you get into that place where your mind is spinning and all those thoughts that are going through like arrows in every different direction in my head, she said, you're throwing your energy on the ground. And I'm like, what? I have a choice? I can direct my thoughts somewhere else. I mean, that had never even occurred to me. That was years ago. I'm still practicing it. But that was just another example of it. Like those thoughts of overwhelm were like that, those arrows being shot through. And I could like hold it and recognize for what it was and have some compassion for it. And then know, like, come to a place of trusting in myself that this is not going to like put me in bed for 3 days. I'm going to keep going.
Yeah. It's funny. The last person that I had as a cellie before I got out, also a type 6. I have a lot of type 6s in my life. It's Dana and I actually were joking about this the other day. I have so much type 6 around me. And one of the I think kind of epiphanies that he had was saying it a different way, but the same. I think the same meaning is that I didn't die. Yes. This thing that I thought would kill me didn't kill me. So,
yeah.
And it's like many of the things that we do and that we learn. It's a practice. It's a thing that's very difficult today, but I'm going to try. And then tomorrow it's still difficult, but I did a little better. And then over time, it becomes a muscle that is just stronger. And that's a good thing.
Yeah. Somebody who was in my Path to Freedom class last time had this beautiful analogy, and I've used it ever since. And she had done a lot of work, and someone asked her, well, how did you make that change? That was the kind of the topic. And she said, it's like you have two marble jars, and the one marble jar is all full of marbles. And that's the hard part, and every time you make a little decision, like what we're talking about, you just put one marble into the jar, and it's one marble into the jar. And I think that's a good description of it.
Yeah, I love that. That would be a fun podcast title, One Marble into the Jar. I have a question, and actually it's not even a question. It's just, I just want to open the floor. Anything that you'd like to say or include here, any questions that I did not ask that you want to answer. What would you say to the listener, anybody who might be considering starting this track, which starts with 9P1K into Path to Freedom, which, that's the first two things, classes that happen before GTP is even an option or even a thing they talk to you about. But to the listener, anything, I'll just give you the last words here, and anything that you'd like to say, or like I said, any questions you'd like to answer that I didn't ask, or whatever's on your mind.
Well, what popped into my mind was the words from a song, that the song is kind of about relationships, and that they're hard, sometimes, but the line is, it's good work if you can get it. And that's a David Wilcox song. And I love that. And that's what I feel about this. It's good work if you can get it. I mean, do you have the time to take these classes? Do you have the heart to do it? Do you have the courage to face yourself? Can you go all in this process? And it is such good work. And there is such love. I mean, I guess that's the other thing I would say that has always drawn me to EPP, is that I've always seen and felt, and even before I was a part of EPP, that love is kind of like the undercurrent of it all. And that's starting with what's right about you. It's in everything, that I think. And I'm just thinking about my experience at Shakopee Women's Prison, which has been an amazing experience, and we haven't been there since before COVID, but it's about love. The people who have supported me in my training as a guide and my ongoing learning as a guide, at times I've made mistakes. I mean, it's been love, we're all trying to, and with this, another thought, with the guide, something I said earlier, the giving feedback, can be hard for me. But for me to put it in the perspective of, we're all going towards the same goal, and it's all for all of us. The purpose of giving hard feedback is because we care about our every participant in every class. And so it's, how can we hold people with love? How can we, I don't know, just share. It's so much more than just sharing information. And that's part of what's hard about it. It is sharing it's sharing and knowing the information, but it's holding ourselves and holding others with love and courage and with heart.
For more information about EPP, please visit EnneagramPrisonProject.org. We appreciate your time and attention today. Stay tuned for future episodes of the podcast, which you can expect on the first Tuesday of every month, as we continue to tell the story of the Enneagram Prison Project.